We are about to Mount Sinai, but some things happen here in chapter 18 that are significant in Israelite history. Exodus 18, verses 1 to 12, Moses is reunited with his family. And I don't know if you have ever really thought about that before, but when you go all the way back to Exodus chapter 4, before Moses goes to Pharaoh, his wife confronts him about everything that's happened. Well, that's the last time we read of her until we get to Exodus 18. We don't know exactly how long or how much time has passed from Exodus 4 to Exodus 18, but that's your first blank. Exodus 4 is the last time we read of his family. He has a wife and 2 children, and they've gone to live or stay with her father, Jethro. Well, now they're reunited. So you've got the plagues, the crossing of the Red Sea, the beginning of the wilderness wanderings. All of that we know took several months. But again, that would be, and you think of the environment, what these people are dealing with, that would be that would feel like a long time, wouldn't it? I've gone on overseas mission trips and been, I think the longest I've been is about 28 or 30 days, something like that. That can feel like a long time. It's not really. You know, a month can go by pretty quickly. You think of people who have been deployed overseas. What's your longest deployment you ever had? Wow, 9 months, yeah. And it may have been something like that. We just don't know. But it has been some time since he has seen his family. So that's your first 12 verses of Exodus chapter 18. Not really a whole lot to comment on here, other than they are reunited. His 2 sons' names, verse 3, Gershom, and verse 4, Eliezer. Verse 5 says, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife unto Moses into the wilderness where he encamped at the mount of God. So this is where we are. Let's see. Verse 8, Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done unto Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and all the travail that had come upon them by the way, and how the Lord delivered them. Jethro rejoiced for all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. He blesses the Lord and offers sacrifice. Took a burnt offering, verse 12. And Aaron came and all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. So again, not a whole lot of comment to make there, just this reunion of the family. Now, verses 13 to 27, again, like I said, I feel is rather significant because you have the establishment of judges. And I'm not talking about like the judges of the book of Judges, but like a system of order, law and order, we might say, among a minimum of 1 million people. Do you guys remember how many males there are that left Egypt? About 600,000. That doesn't count the women and children. So I would say conservative estimate would be 1 million people. You have any number of people together for an extended period of time, and what's going to happen? Conflict. Do what? Complaining, conflict. Issues are going to come up. So, imagine you've got 1 million people. And the thing is, it's not just the people. Stressful, tiring situation. Moses could not do what we're going to read about here in just a minute all by himself, although he's trying. Right. Well, we don't know how all that worked out, but things happen seemingly on a daily basis. Because when you start reading there in verse 13, let's just read a couple verses and then we'll talk about it a little bit. It came to pass on the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood by Moses from the morning unto evening. Well, I mean, and it's all sorts of disputes, because the way the judges are broken down here, it's by different numbers, tens and fifties and hundreds, and you think about the disputes that are, okay, If you have 2 children or more, if you raised that, or 4 or 5, whatever, and you think of the daily disputes that you've had to deal with, disputes can arise over very little things. But the sad thing is that can even happen with adults, can't it? If you've ever been in the you've been in the workforce, you know that happens. I think of people, in administration, schools, businesses, whatever, HR. I don't think that would be a fun thing to do, because you're not going to be dealing with Christians every day if you're in the world. You're going to be dealing with non-Christians, and hopefully if you are dealing with some Christians, they'll behave like they ought to behave. Sadly, they don't always, but there's always going to be something when you have a group of people together for an extended period of time under, again, a stressful and tiring journey here. And you just think about it. That's all I have here. Stressful, tiring situation. You're walking. You're in a desert. You don't know where you're going. It's a massive number of people. You've left the only place that you've known your entire life, and you're 2.5 months into this journey, 3 months into this journey. Don't you think that you could start getting a little maybe hangry sometimes? You've heard that word before. I couldn't imagine the difficulty. Just say it that way. They stand before Moses from morning unto the evening. And when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did to the people, he said, What is this that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou thyself alone? And all the people stand by thee from morning unto evening. You're going to wear them out, you're going to wear yourself out. You cannot maintain this. And that makes sense. We know that. And so he gives him advice. He tells him in verse 17, what you're doing is not good. The King James says, you're going to wear away, and so are the people. It's too heavy for you. So here's my advice to you. Verse 21. Thou shalt provide out of all the people. Okay, so 4 requirements here. I've got those in your outline. Able men who fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness. So your next blank there, I kind of skipped over that. The solution was delegation. Moses cannot do this all by himself. And just reading the text and going through this, you think of the work of the church, and you've heard me talk about this in sermons and Bible classes and stuff. The work of the church is not just the preacher's work, the elder's work, the deacon's work, it's every member. It's like Paul says in Romans 12, verses 4 and 5, we are individually members one of another, and therefore you work that way. So, this is what you find. You delegate. You cannot do it all yourself. And think about this. If Moses didn't delegate, how would these men who met these 4 requirements, how would they be able to, we use the word blossom sometimes, be able to develop their abilities in serving their fellow Israelites, but also in turn serving God? If you try to do it all yourself, you're taking away someone else's opportunity to serve and someone else's opportunity to develop. That was true then, and that's true now in the Lord's church. Ask for help if you're trying to do something. Don't try to do it all yourself. Delegate. And that will be a benefit to you, and it'll be a benefit to whoever you get to help you. Let them judge the people at all times, and it will be that every great matter they shall bring unto thee. Okay, the big stuff. We'll go to Moses. Moses has, as we might say, a direct line to God, a direct line of communication to Jehovah. They can handle the small stuff. If you do this thing, and look at verse 23. If you do this thing, and the King James says, and God commanded thee so. The New King James says, and God so commands you. In other words, it's like he's giving him this idea, but you need to go seek God's permission. And that's what I put. Verse 23 indicates that Moses ought to seek wisdom from God. This is good sound advice from a man, but it's like Jethro says, if this is what God permits, then do it. Well, that's what Moses does. He listened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he said, and he did this. He chose those men and they judge the people at all times. Okay, so let's talk about that for just a minute. The 4 requirements. Okay, not everybody has the temperament to settle disputes. Would you agree with that? Steve, would you agree with that in your line of work? And Bryce, and well, Kevin, and your experience. And not everybody has the capacity to deal with disputes. And so you need men who are able to do that. Okay? You need men who fear God. Well, they need a proper reverence. If they're going to handle man-to-man relations, they need to know God and reverence God. Men of truth, well, truth is the foundation of God's throne, according to the Psalms. And so if you're going to handle disputes, you need to be able to recognize what's right and wrong. And why would you throw in there hating covetousness? Why would that play any role in decision making? It's not? It's not really good for a judge to take bribes. That's exactly right. This is all reviewed in Deuteronomy chapter 1. I put that in there. Deuteronomy 1, 9 through 18. We're not going to turn over there. But sound advice from his father-in-law, and this is the way it's done. Let's do this real quick. Turn over to 1 Corinthians chapter 6. I thought about this passage when I was putting the outline together yesterday and today, but I didn't include it in your outline. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Somebody read, please. 1 Corinthians 6, 1 and 5. Just those 2 verses. 1 Corinthians 6, 1 and 5. Christians should not take Christians to court. That's what was happening in Corinth. And Paul asks a question there in verse 5. Is there not a wise man among you that can handle these disputes? That's shameful. That's what he says to them. So, that's something to think about. If a dispute arises between 2 Christians, surely there's a wise man within the Lord's church that can say, let's sit down, let's talk about this, and work it out. I have known personally Christians who have taken each other to court, family members, over property lines and inheritance disputes, and they will fight every last second they can to get what they want. And so not only does Paul say that, look at verse 6. But brother goes to law against brother. That's bad enough. And then he says, and they do that before unbelievers. They'll drag each other to court in front of non-Christians. How shameful is that? That's something to think about, isn't it? It's an utter failure for you, verse 7. His language is very strong here. It is an utter failure for you. Why don't you just accept the wrong? It's not a sin to go to court. But when it comes to Christian, I think Paul indicates that it is. Handle it. Handle it within the church. And if there's not a wise man among you, then the congregation has a problem, doesn't it? Anyway, any questions or comments on Exodus chapter 18? Acts chapter 6, okay. Oh, the delegation? Yes. Yeah. The apostles, they had a lot to do, didn't they? But there were some widows being neglected in the distribution of daily needs. And they had work to do. They said, you guys find somebody to handle this. We're busy. So I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because what does happen in the church sometimes is instead of seeking help, and I know I've done this in the past too, is I'll just do it myself. I had somebody at Leonard Street in Pensacola talk to an older gentleman. He was a rough guy. I mean, he was a faithful Christian, but he was an old Marine, just kind of rough, you know. Not in a like a sinful way. That was just his. It's how he talked, and he was just very blunt and straightforward. And he talked to me about that one time, not because I was doing something. He just like giving advice from an old man who had a lot of experience. And he said, you know, if you fail to let somebody help you, you're hurting yourself, but you're also hurting that person. That maybe you don't even know, but who may be willing to help. And that could encourage them to do more within the church. So we need to think about that sometimes. Anyway, anything else on Exodus 18? Okay. Well, we get to the Sinai Peninsula. I've got some pictures up here I want you to see. This is quite an amazing landscape. I don't know how you visualize it in your mind, but I've got, I think, 4 images here. Somebody commented on the live stream, when you handle things within the church needs to keep it in the church and not go out and tell the world about it. That's as bad as taking a brother to court. Yes. Church discipline, yeah. You handle it internally and leave it there. All right. So here's an illustrated map. You see the Nile Delta. Everything's green around the Nile River. And then you have, of course, on the left, the Gulf of Suez, and on the right, the Gulf of Aqaba, and the Red Sea down there at the bottom. But they're going into this center area here. Let's see here. My clicker is not... I got to learn how to highlight with this thing. I knew it at one time. I just haven't done it in a while. Anyway, there's the lay of the land. It is not friendly country. You're just out in the middle of nowhere. There's a satellite image. And you can see, there we go. You can see along the Suez Canal here, it's flat. And then you get in this mountainous area. And then here's another satellite image from a little lower. 1 million people walking through this. So again, thinking of stress, tiring, does that look like a place where you're going to have a lot of food and water? Probably not. I mean, I'm sure there's some wildlife, but, you know, God provides them with the quail and the manna. But it's just a brutal landscape. And so you see when you look at it like that, you see the need for God's provision during 40 years. So they've come from over here all the way down. So we talk about Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai. We don't know which of these mountains it is. I mean, there's speculation which one of these mountains it is, but it's a mountain range in the Sinai Peninsula. But then you go north and east a little bit, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but the Red Sea is right here. I'm sorry, the Dead Sea is right here. So that's what's going to become the Promised Land up in that region. So they wander in this area for 40 years. How long does it take them to get there according to chapter 19 from Egypt? What? 3 months. That's a long time to be walking in a wilderness like this, isn't it? The 3rd month, the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt the same day. Okay, so the same day they left, 3rd month, on that same day they enter into the wilderness of Sinai, for they were departed from Rephidim and were come to the desert of Sinai and had pitched in the wilderness, and there Israel camped before the mountain. Again, which mount we don't know. There's a lot of speculation, but we just don't know which one it was. So verses 1 and 2, you have that. They make it to the peninsula. Verses 3 to 6, here's God's message to the Israelites. Significant. Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel. That's what's called a parallelism. He says the same thing with different words. The house of Jacob is the children of Israel. You have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bear you on eagle's wings. Did any of you watch that video I shared? Okay. We'll do that when you get home. Don't do it right now. It's like a 3-minute video on, I don't even know what they call the young eagles, but learning to fly. It takes its first flight, and I think it was the female eagle with it. Pretty amazing video. But God says, I bore you on eagle's wings. So, watch that video tonight, tomorrow, whenever. But it just helps you visualize what God tells them here. I bear you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. So, what set them apart from everybody else? Was it the fact that they were the descendants of Abraham? What set them apart according to that verse? Do what I say. No other nation had this covenant. It's not revealed for us until chapter 20. But you will be my special people if you do this. A kingdom of priests and holy nation. Doesn't the New Testament say the same thing about Christians? In 1 Peter 2, verses 9 and 10? A holy nation, a peculiar people. You're a priesthood. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto. So this is God speaking to Moses, and what Moses then is in turn to tell the people. So here it is. They were afraid, tired, hungry, thirsty, and stubborn in this kind of an environment, and yet God maintained them. And yet God gave them a covenant and said, you're going to be my people. Above everybody else on the earth, you are mine. But you have to abide by the covenant. And there are people, one reason to me this is significant, that statement is significant, is because there are a lot of people who believe you can't. You can't. It's not possible to please God. Some people will even go that far. And you can't do everything perfectly. Well, nobody says you, and God never says that, to be perfect. But He does demand faithfulness, doesn't He? There's a major difference in sinless perfection and faithful obedience. And the Israelites, faithful obedience was required. If it were perfection, well then if you could be perfect, why need sacrifice, right? Because sacrifice washed away sin. God knew that. So, verses 7 to 15. The people were to get prepared to meet with God. This is an interesting text to me as well. Look at verse 8. The people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. This is like the first time as a nation they have collectively said, we're going to follow this covenant. Because it's just been told them, you're going to get one. And as a nation, collectively, okay, we'll do it. Moses returned the words of the people unto the Lord. Behold, I come to thee in a thick cloud. I've got several verses here. Well, there are 4 verses. It's referenced. Verse 9 here, verse 16, and then twice in the book of Deuteronomy. He's going to appear on the mountain. Moses will be with him, but the people are going to see this thick cloud. And so your next blanks are, this should have, and they're going to hear what's going to be going on the mountain. Okay, you've got the smoke, which is the presence of God. But what else is going on while God is communicating with Moses? You remember? Lightning and thunder. The earth is going to be quaking. And all of that is because of the presence of God. So, this should have impressed the people with God's glory and power. Now, they've already seen His power displayed on the Egyptians, haven't they? But this is up close and personal with the presence of God itself. So, if you were to go to, we're not going to do this, but you go to Hebrews 12, read verses 18 to 21, and it talks about this setting. But here's the good thing. When you do turn over there, I said you don't have to turn over there, but he's talking about that experience on the mountain. It burned with fire and blackness and darkness and all this. And Moses was exceedingly afraid and trembled. And yet he was there in the presence of God Himself. But then to the Christian he says, but you have come to Mount Zion, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You're at a better place than they were. Don't we have a better covenant that was established on better promises? Hebrews 8:6. Just imagine 3 months wandering, again, through this landscape, 1 million people or more, and now you're in the presence of God. And what was the penalty for touching the mountain? Death. Okay? We're going to get, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but we're going to get... Yeah, we really don't know. There are those who argue that they crossed it up here in this very narrow, shallow section. But we just don't know. But it had to be big enough to be, if you remember, the text says there were walls of water on either side and the clouds were above. Paul even talks about that in 1 Corinthians 10. But they walked through dry ground. We don't really know. Well, it was 3 months from the time they left Egypt till they got to the Sinai Peninsula. Yeah. So that 3 month. Yeah, Egypt's to the left over here. So it took them 3 months to get from over here to somewhere down in this region, the Sinai Peninsula. Yeah. If you look at a map, because there's a description. I think it's in the book of Numbers that tells you all the places they hit. And so they cross the Red Sea wherever, they get here, and then it's kind of a wandering, like in loops. They can't go up in the land of the Philistines because there might be battle. So they go out in this direction on the east side of that's the Dead Sea right there, and wander around a little bit, and they cross just north of the Dead Sea, the Jordan River, to go into Jericho. So they go down and up and around and through and cross over. Right. They were attacked that one time by the Amalekites. But that was early on, you might say. Yeah. Okay. Israel's to prepare to meet God. Let's look at this here. Verse 10 beginning. The Lord said unto Moses, Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes and be ready the third day. For the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. So again, that's where Moses goes up and meets him. Thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about. Do not go up into the mount or touch the border. Whoever touches the mount shall surely be put to death. Man, animal, it doesn't matter. He might be stoned to death or shot through with an arrow. You do not come into the presence of God uninvited. And you've heard me talk about this before, the paintings we see of the first moments in heaven, running up to Jesus and running up to God. And I don't know what it's going to be like, but everything I know from Scripture, that's probably not it. You don't just run into His presence, because you have the contrast here of the glory, the power, the holiness of God, and then the people who have complained and will continue to complain. You have that contrast of holiness, complete holiness, versus men, humans. So, 3 things. Wash your clothes, do not touch the mountain, and no sexual relations, verse 15. God's manner of appearance and their sanctification was to impress Israel with the presence of God and the necessity of their compliance. That's your next blank. The necessity of their compliance with His revealed will. So this goes back to chapter 19, verses 4 through 6. I'm going to give you a covenant, then you will be my special treasure, but you have to do what I say. It's conditional. And this appearance of God on the mountain, again, with the thick cloud, the thunder, the lightning, the earthquaking, and the punishment of death for violating the border, or the boundaries, that should have impressed the people with, and it seemingly did, with who God is and the power that He possesses. Again, it was one thing to see the plagues, right? To watch them at a distance affect the Egyptians and not affect you. But now you're there. You're looking up the mountain, however high, and there's God. There's His presence with Moses. And all of this is being revealed. That would be something. So again, as Tammy was saying, we're 3 months in here. It lasts for 40 years. I don't care how long you live. I would like to think this is something I'll never forget. Witnessing the majesty of God, however many feet away, I'd be very tempted to not cross Him. I would think, but like I've said before, it's easy to sit in here in this nice auditorium and say things like that, and you're not there walking through a wilderness for 40 years in a very unforgiving terrain, going somewhere you've never been and don't know what you're facing the next day. All right, any thoughts or questions on all of that?
How long was it before they actually got there and sent the spies in? Was that before the year?
Yeah, so that they send the spies in Numbers chapters 13 and 14, but that's right before they go into Jericho pretty much. Because they're just on the other side of Jordan when they do that.
Well, I'm talking about the other spies, the 12 spies.
Mm-hmm.
12 spies. When they leave Mount Sinai, the 12 spies are in Kadesh Barnea. They're there 40 days, that's why they get 40 years. But then later on, they send in the spies to Jericho and Rahab.
Yeah, so what?
I'm talking about the first group. Before
He's talking about
years of
Joshua and Caleb.
Yeah, Joshua and Caleb. Right.
That was before the 40 years.
Yes. Okay. I was confused and not understanding anything, apparently.
How long after they left Egypt until the point they sent those 12 spies in? The original.
Yeah, I don't know.
I was just curious.
I'm completely flustered, Reggie. Thanks. Is my face red? That was lost, is it? It's hot in here. I don't know. Why don't you report on that next week? And I don't know, man. My mind was not in this place yours was.
Mary Tammy asked about if we knew where they crossed. I recently saw a little short video. I didn't know if it was true or not. I've been kind of trying to find information on it. Where they found melted and fused sand next to the Red Sea. And they've been trying to explain how that happened. But they think it could be the pillar of fire and melted it when it was there.
Oh, yeah.
I would like to believe that if we knew the location of that area of melted sand, which is an odd thing because there's nothing like that around it, that would be awful close to where they crossed. I don't know
Yeah.
where.
And I don't know. There's something highlighted, right? You see that green dot right there in the center? I don't know that that's like a guess, but I don't know.
I would assume that if that is true, that location is there, that would be awfully close because that's what stopped the Egyptians.
Right.
Back while they crossed.
Well, archaeology has found similar things near the Dead Sea, where Sodom and Gomorrah would have been. They've discovered some pretty interesting things like that in excavations.
They were saying it takes 3,000 degrees to melt sand, and that there's only a few things that could cause that naturally, maybe lightning or,
Yeah.
they throw out some wild ideas like that, a meteorite or something.
Right.
But it could be the pillar of fire.
Right.
Do you know where in Egypt on that picture, where most of the Jews were at in slavery?
Goshen is where they came to initially. And it's kind of over here on the, what would you say, the east side of Egypt proper. But I really don't know off the top of my head, but I would guess somewhere in that region right there. You've got the Valley of the Kings that runs down south here, where all the pharaohs are buried and stuff. Yes, and then probably in the Nile Delta, yeah. Yeah, initially, Jacob, when the 70 came down to Egypt with Joseph, they settled in Goshen, which is somewhere in that region. Yeah. Like an exclamation, land of Goshen. That's the first time I've ever heard it. All right, so 2 blanks here. The sights and sounds of the people the sights and sounds put the people in fear, verse 16. And then Moses is to warn the people. The priests are called out. That's probably like the heads of the families, because we're still in the patriarchal. The Levitical priesthood has not been established yet. So probably heads of families. Everyone in Scripture who encountered the presence of God realized their unworthiness. That's your last blank. And that's what I was trying to express earlier. You've got the pure holiness of God, and who are you in His presence? You are not going to run up to Him and just hug Him. And I listed several examples there. My favorite one is John 19, 4 through 6. When they're looking for Jesus in the garden and He says, I am, what did they do? They fell backwards onto the ground. You don't just run up to Him and give Him a big old hug. All right.
In that story of Moses when he was baby and everything, would it be, could we guess that there were not very many men right at the same age as Moses? Because they killed a lot of them.
Yeah, that was the decree from Pharaoh, yeah. Kill all the male children, yep. Don't know how many survived. No. The fire at night and the cloud of day. By the day, yeah. You probably, if you have your personal Bible, you probably have a map of it in the back there that shows you the route. Yeah. But to make it last 40 years, they had to wind around a little bit. Square, I don't know. Square mileage, I don't know. The Sinai Peninsula is a little over 200. Okay. 250 miles bottom to top. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, that's what the pillar of cloud and fire was for. It led them. So they didn't have to, they weren't guessing. Oh, yeah. Well, there are, and again, the book of Numbers gives the route. And yes, the book of Numbers gives the route specifically. Yep. All right, guys. Thank you.